Controversial opinion: vacant property tax won't work, it's false hope, and it is just a distraction. If you think the introduction of a vacant property tax is about solving the housing crisis, you're wrong. It's about something completely different, which I'll explain in a minute. Ireland's Minister of Finance, Paschal Donohoe, announced that the government may not introduce the much talked about vacant property tax, as the number of vacant properties reported in the most recent local property tax returns was lower than expected. Some will make a valid point that the local property tax returns are a self-assessment and owners may not want to mark properties as vacant for whatever self-interest. However, I would call a false flag on this, because owners that mark their properties as usable and vacant still have to pay property tax. Owners that mark their properties unusable and vacant do not have to pay property tax. Therefore, right now, there's no incentive not to mark your property down as vacant and unusable, because there is no vacant property tax. So at the moment, there is no self-serving interest to not mark your property down as vacant. There's been lots of different property taxes over the last 300 years from all over the world, and people have always found a way to somehow avoid those property taxes. For God's sake, people even blocked up their windows and lived in darkness to avoid property tax when the window tax was introduced. What makes people think that the vast majority of property owners won't find a way to avoid the vacant property tax? I'm sure they'll find multiple ways to avoid this tax if it is ever introduced. There's nothing new about avoiding taxes or avoiding property taxes. There's examples all over the world where people have changed their habits just to avoid a particular type of tax. As I said, people lived in darkness due to the window tax, and I'm sure people with vacant properties will find a way to avoid the new vacant property tax if it is ever introduced. Commercial landlords have avoided paying council rates for years on vacant properties. They've done this perhaps because they want to keep properties vacant because they have a long-term plan and need to keep certain units vacant for whatever reason. They avoid paying the tax on these units by placing the properties on the market to let and demanding rents that are far higher than the market, or perhaps demanding terms that the market just won't accept. Therefore, they keep the properties vacant but also avoid paying any council rates. You might ask why a commercial landlord might want to keep some units vacant, and there are many reasons. Perhaps the landlord has a long-term plan to redevelop a certain location and they're waiting for some leases to expire before they can do that, and they don't want to entertain any short-term leases in the meantime. Perhaps they want to move into the space themselves but they aren't just quite ready, or perhaps there is a deal with a larger anchor tenant and they need some additional units around some vacant space before they can actually take that lease and make that lease happen or make that deal happen. I've seen that happen to an extreme situation where an entire floor of a shopping centre was kept vacant while a deal was being tried to work out with one new anchor tenant. I think nearly 20 units were kept vacant until that deal could actually happen. There are risks associated with keeping units vacant. Perhaps that deal doesn't go through or you don't get planning permission to combine multiple units. My point is, a vacant residential property tax will not force anyone to sell that doesn't want to and won't result in any major increase in supply. If the real goal is to increase supply of vacant units onto the market, offering a tax write-off of any vacant unit that is sold within the next 18 months would result in a flood of vacant properties onto the market right now. But no political party would have the bottle to offer such a solution, because what it's really about is votes. Offering a real solution in terms of a tax write-off would immediately increase supply onto the market but won't win any votes. However, introducing a vacant property tax could result in the loss of 90,000 votes. And that's what it boils down to: votes. The vacant property tax is not about solving the housing crisis. The opposition in Sinn Féin and people before profit are surely smart enough to know that the vacant property tax will not result in a huge increase of supply onto the market, and they won't solve the housing crisis. But they also know if a vacant property tax is introduced, it won't cost them any votes, and they'll be able to claim that they helped deliver a tax on wealthy property owners. Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael are hopefully smart enough to know that the introduction of a vacant property tax will not solve the housing crisis, but they're also probably smart enough to know that the introduction of such a tax will hurt their voters more and will likely result in lost votes. Dublin's residential vacancy rate is extremely low at about 1.4%, and therefore a tax is unlikely to have any great impact on Dublin, and no votes will be gained. Counties with high vacancy rates generally have a very low demand, such as Leitrim, Donegal and Mayo, and some of the vacancy rates in those locations are as high as 10%, if not more. Therefore, the introduction of such a tax will result in lots of lost votes with zero political gain. For Sinn Féin and People Before Profit, the vacant property tax is false hope and a distraction. For Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael, it's a zero-sum game at best and more likely will just cost them votes. If the real goal is to increase supply of vacant properties onto the market, offering a tax write-off on any properties that are sold within the next 18 months or 2 years would result in a flood of properties onto the market. But Sinn Féin and People Before Profit won't suggest this because it goes against their base, and perhaps it might actually work and increase supply. Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael won't suggest it because it will give Sinn Féin and People Before Profit another stick to beat them with, and the press will pick it up as another benefit for wealthy property owners, rather than a method to actually help supply, and no party will pick it up or even suggest it because they know they won't gain any votes from it. As far as I can see it, all the talk around a vacant property tax is all about votes and PR and not about a solution. Agree or disagree, all comments and discussions are welcome in the comments below. I do welcome all your comments. If you want to check out a video that describes how some people avoided property tax in the past, you can check it out over here.